Hello Internet, my name is Martin, and welcome to Teardrop trailer build number 5. I've really been procrastinating on doing the voiceover for this, so I'm going to get right into it. Well, hopefully I don't forget everything. We've got the steel frame base made, and we've also got the underlayment of the entire teardrop built as well. So we've got the steel frame, the wood, insulation layer, and support layer all complete. So now it's time to start defining how it is that we're going to build the rest of the trailer. And so I've drawn up a quick CAD model to draw up the ellipses that I want to use. And I wanted to use nicely mathematically defined models. And here I'm using an ellipse, and an ellipse is easily defined as 2 points where the distance from those points to any point on the ellipse is constant. So if I take the 23.05 leg and the 70.93 leg, at any point in that, if I take those two distances and add them together, that remains constant. And with a little bit of math, you can define what you want. And we only want the outer radius on the back. And then the front radius is going to be a pretty simple radius. And so for this, I've defined the distances between the 2 points from the edge, and I want a 1.5 inch wide strip of wood that is going to create the basics of this frame. Doing this, I can easily define it out, trace it out on the plywood, create our templates, and go from there. So in the end, the final trailer is going to look something like this, where the entire back hatch is on the left, and then we've got a little bit of a front radius on the front for a little bit of less wind resistance. So the whole thing is kind of built to put together like this, where you can kind of sandwich the whole thing together and basically put the top down. So as we go through this, you're going to see some elements that we can actually take the whole entire top off the frame later on, though I don't think there's any reason that I would ever really want to. So the idea that I could take the whole entire top off was born about that maybe later on I might want to add in a large mattress or another desk or something like that. In the end, though, I decided that it's a lot easier to just seal the entire thing up and bring things in through the doors. So it's really not, it was a cool idea, but it's really not necessary, I think, in the end. So here I'm starting to define out exactly the plane upon which I want to do the ellipse. The rear hatch ellipse is where roughly is on the left-hand side of the screen. And what I'm doing here is simply creating a few points upon which to measure out the exact distance of the line that I need. So I need a piece of twine that is exactly the length as calculated. And then at this point, what we do is take that twine and put it at the 2 points in the center of the board, which I'm putting in here, and use those 2 points as the anchor for the line. Here we calculate roughly where the ellipse should start, and then using the line, which is barely visible in this video, which is wrapped around the pen is keeping that distance constant, and nicely we can draw the ellipse exactly where we need it. So now it's just time to basically cut out the template. When I decided to cut this template out, I decided to do it as a strip 1.5 inches wide and call that the template. And you'll see later that that just didn't work out the way I wanted. But here we have basically what we kind of, it's prototyping what it is we want to do on cheap OSB. Of course, at the time of this video, I think OSB was actually about $100 a sheet due to the pandemic. And here I've just sanded it down, and I'm prototyping the curve just to make sure that the utility plywood is going to make the curve. This is a piece of OSB that I had sitting around. Now, I'm sorry about the audio here. I've been dealing with some microphone boost issues apparently, but I don't want to re-record everything. I also lost some footage, unfortunately, but so it goes. So at this point, I've cut out my OSB template that was supposed to be about 1.5 inches wide, but this really just didn't work out. For one reason, the OSB was just way too flimsy. You couldn't even keep it rigid in the curved direction, let alone side to side. The second reason that the OSB template didn't work, though, was on these pieces, which were supposed to form the edges or the main structural supports for the hatch lid, was that I needed to route some grooves for the foam D-ring that would go in and create the hatch seal. I think at this point what I'd like to do is let Past Me explain a little bit more about why I ended up switching template systems. And these guys were going to be the hatch tops. You can see here I've routed the groove into which the styrofoam seal would go into. So two of these would be sandwiched together. The problem here is I can't route this way without a good template. The reason being is that when I've got the router coming in here and I'm using a trim router or with an edge fence, the edge doesn't go in because of the curve. It's taking average of 2 points effectively across this curve right here and then cutting upwards. So where the cut depth is perfect here. So this has got a groove in it. Well, it doesn't show now, I'll show over here. So while this side here has a nice groove in it, this groove depth is perfect here, but then gets shallower as the curve goes here. And even at about this point, there's almost no curve. And then this edge is rough enough that it's just bumpy. And so when you put the two pieces together, they don't even line up. So these are junk. No big deal. It's not the end of the world. Learning experience. So yeah, I kind of screwed that up a little bit. So in the end, what I'd end up doing is I've watched a lot of other people's YouTube videos on Teardrop trailer builds, and Oregon Batman kind of gave me the idea of having some templates specifically for each curve to do that routing. Now that routing, I don't know if I explained it very well, that routing is going to be where there's going to be a foam seal that sits inside that groove in order to create the seal of the hatch, and I think in later videos you'll get a view of that. But for now, just know that I wanted to take two pieces of plywood, laminate them together with a groove cut in them so that a piece of styrofoam or a foam D-shaped seal would go in there, and then a matching piece would be coming up from the bottom curve. So here what I'm doing is I just want the full curve inside and out. So I'm using the existing pieces that I've cut to define that radius. And what I can do is create a radius template that can be screwed onto the wood temporarily to create those curves, or clamped on. So the first thing to do is to just kind of rough cut out the curves as I need them. And that's all we're doing here. The next step then is, as we get further, to kind of rough it out closer with the jigsaw. I really hate this jigsaw. This is a piece of crap from Harbor Freight, and I swear, getting to within half an inch, you're lucky to not hit the line that you're trying to aim for. The blades just seem to wander. Maybe I'm just really bad at using a jigsaw, but I never had good luck. So I was really careful here to not get too close to the line so that I wouldn't cut into it, because for this template you cannot have bumps or gaps in the template because the router bit is going to be going along this in a smooth surface. So instead, I would rough cut it out and then use it, finely cut it down with a sander. And here I'm making sure that the two templates can actually be lined up and that we've got about 1.5 inches. At this point, I probably really should have had a dust mask, but at this point in the pandemic, N95 masks were really hard to come by. So really all I had was my protective dust tongue, as you often see probably when I'm concentrating and not paying attention to whether or not I'm on video. At the very least, though, there are safety glasses. I do recommend, though, these days, if you can get it, an N95 or something like that. Wood dust is at least relatively organic, but probably still not a good idea to be breathing in a lot of. So here I'm just going along real nice and slow and going right up to that pencil line that I did before. Now here I've got some 1.5 inch pieces that I wanted to use, and I'm just temporarily nailing these two pieces together. But what I'm going to do is use the piece of wood as a template along the surface of the first template to create an exact 1.5 inches along the whole entire outer radius. So because I had a piece of wood that was exactly 1.5 inches, I was able to create a really nice matching curve that is exactly 1.5 inches from the other. So now it's time to rough cut out what I had just traced out nicely. Again, making sure that I don't go too far with the cuts with the skill saw that absolutely sucks, that I cannot recommend. And we're going to basically repeat the whole entire process over again. Also, here I'm using the Osb as kind of a worksheet because I don't want to ding up and damage the future floor of my teardrop too much. But we rinse and repeat. Sand it down to the line, get it as close as we can, and make it look like a real nice smooth ellipse that we can use as a template for a router bit. And then what we can do is rough cut out a piece of wood, clamp it to this template, and then use the router to copy it almost exactly. And this turned out to be a really good method of doing things. The way Oregon Batman did it, I believe, was he used a piece of wood that he bent into that shape, and I just didn't feel comfortable doing that just because I wanted the curve to be almost exactly in a certain way, and I want it to be mathematically defined. Nerd side of me, I guess. So this is how I ended up getting a really good curve for the teardrop trailer. So now the next thing to do is to take the interior curve and define that as a function of the exterior curve. So what I have here is a piece of 3/8 inch plywood that we're going to rinse and repeat the same process on. I've traced out the interior curve onto this piece of plywood, and then we just need to rough cut it out so that we have an easier time sanding it. So the first thing we're going to do then is start with the belt sander and get it down as reasonably close to that line as we can. The belt sander is nice because it's really aggressive, so I can kind of back off from the line with that crappy jigsaw and really get roughly close to where I want to go. But then for the final fine-tuning of getting it right down to that line and perfectly, end up using a palm sander instead, because the belt sander has 80 and 120 grit, whereas I can probably put finer grits on this, and I feel like I got a little more control with it. In the end, we get an interior and an exterior curve template for the back hatch that match up almost perfectly. There's a little bit of a gap here, but you'll find that as you kind of rotate it, there's certain points where it matches up perfectly. At this point, now we can take our pieces of wood that we've got rough cut, and for the first portion here, I'm screwing these in, and these are the bottom edge of the templates. This is going to become the wall of the back hatch. So at this point, I'd really like to talk a little bit about power tool safety. I'm using a trim router here, and you got to have a lot of respect for trim routers. You can't do anything stupid. They've got a lot of velocity. And here, I don't have this workpiece clamped down to my base. I really recommend doing something like that so you can have both hands on the router. But I'm going to let this clip speak for itself. So yeah, definitely not the best safety practices here, but you can see I kind of started learning that you really need to have both hands on the router at the same time. Still looking back at this video, I kind of cringe still at leaving the router running while doing other things, or putting a hand down while getting the router established and then moving the hand over. So if you're following my YouTube channel for safety precautions, probably not a good idea. You can see here the result that it took a little nice bite out of my piece here. Now, back to the actual technical topic at hand. This template actually has some some divots in it, and you can see just how the divots are being replicated to the final piece. So one of the things that I end up doing is actually filling the template in with some epoxy glue and then sanding that down further so that future pieces won't get those same dips being created. Because little dips like that, you wouldn't think they're too big of a deal, but they will really show up cosmetically down the future. So at this point, with a little bit of experience under my belt with creating the templates, it's time to create the small radius templates. So I need to create both a interior radius template and exterior radius template. So this piece here is going to be the, I guess it's going to be the exterior radius template, even though it's kind of inwards facing. And I'm just rough cutting everything out from this point, and just kind of going through. Also, I guess it's time to engage safety squints. Usually I'm better about wearing safety glasses. Oh no, I actually am wearing safety glasses here. Good, I can be a good example since we've already had one screw up on the safety front. But once again, we're rinsing and repeating. Take the edge, cut it back, sand it down, and we should have two radius templates that we can use for routing. So here we've got the templates done, and I've used them to draw out the pieces that will be used for the exterior shell. At which point, once we've got all these pieces cut, we can actually start assembling the shell. I think this video's been kind of boring and long enough as it is, but we can use these templates to then also route those things out and get them exactly to the shape that we want. I think I'm going to end the video here as video number 5, and we'll see you back in video number 6 with hopefully building out some of the frame. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully it won't be so long before video number 6 comes out.